This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. We are so close to MLK Day games going on, but so much is happening in the world of sports. And as always, man, I love to break bread with my brother from another mother, www.shawsports.net, become the PNC, my man, Mr. Warrenshaw, a.k.a. The Warrenshaw. What's good, my brother? How have you been doing? Have your eyes been lighting up watching all of the fabulous basketball that has been played so far at the early outset of the 2026 NBA season?
It's been a good week. The year is off to a great start. The NBA continues to deliver, as we say, often, almost seemingly every week. But yeah, man, I'm really excited about this week's show. We have a trade, right? And how this trade will impact the landscape is something that we'll discuss in addition to multiple other topics on this week's edition of The Baseline. But yes, as you alluded to, January is a great time, post-Christmas. Yes, the NFL playoffs are on, but everyone is starting to focus a little bit more on the NBA, which we love as much as anybody else out there, man.
Yeah, so the NBA felt a little bit of a shockwave with the recent trade, which we will get into. Quote unquote, the ice tray has been now moved to places elsewhere, and we'll dig into that. We'll also dig into a couple of other nuggets of information that has been kind of, leaking out of the in the NBA trade rumors with some possible moves that may happen before NBA trade deadline, which makes me feel like, yo, man, like, are we already at the NBA All-Star weekend? Or like this, it can't come soon enough for all the craziness that's already been happening in like the last 72 hours as far as NBA trade rumors and everything that goes on, right?
No, you're right. And I think it's indicative of the fervor that while OKC was running away with things to begin, they've looked a little bit more mortal. And now maybe more teams need to say, you know what, this isn't a dynasty in the making per se. Maybe it's not. Let's go ahead and push our chips in on some aspects. So I think there's going to be a lot of conversation. Whether that leads to activation, that remains to be seen, obviously. But I think for us here on The Baseline, continued opportunities to discuss this great game and the possibilities of a 2026 NBA season.
Absolutely. And then also, we got a couple of important news that are coming out, storylines that are coming out we'll get into. And then, I know it's been a minute. Shaw has, kind of put emphasis on this. We always got to get back to the roots, the original good stuff that we always try to dig into at our shows. And it's been a while since we do a Who You Got. It's just been a minute. And, listen, man, we got some nice prospects this season that has given, has kind of opened up the floodgates for us to like kind of, get back in our bag here and have this conversation again. So we'll be talking about two, particularly talented young stars, budding stars in the NBA. And we'll pose the question between one of these guys. If you had to start a franchise, if you had this, as a cornerstone piece of your organization, which of these guys would you take, right? So it's a good way for us to start off the new year. And as always, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us. Be sure to get on my man Shaw at The Warren Shaw, and me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Available on all the major platforms. You know where to find this. You can go to www.thebaselinenba.com to catch not just this episode, but also the plethora of episodes that we have been dropping for your listening pleasure. If you see us on the YouTube channel and you see the blue and white logo down in the lower corner of your screen, you know that we rocks with the 19 Media Group family. Shout out to our 19 Media Group family members. Be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com to not only check us, but also the great family of content creators that are part of the 19 Media Group family. Sports, entertainment, culture, music, whatever you're feeling for. 19 Media Group has got it for your listening pleasure. So definitely go check out the website and check out all of the great story content creators that are a part of the 19 Media Group family. Coming up, Sean and I get into the news and notes, especially with the big trade that just happened, like less than 72 hours ago. But first, we got to let you know this episode of the Baseline NBA podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Whether you're starting a new routine or making player picks for the first time, trying something new can be hard, but in life, on Prize Picks, it always feels good to be right. With high-pressure playoff matchups every weekend and elite hoops, almost every night the action never stops and Prize Picks lets you take control. This basketball season, I've been having a blast making lineups. It's super simple and quick. Here's how it works. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you get them right, you can cash in. I've been checking out projections for SGA, Jalen Brown, and Cooper Flag lately, and trust me, seeing your takes hit is the chef's kiss. You can also find your community on Prize Picks. With the new social feeds feature, you can share Prize Picks with your friends and copy lineups from winners with a single click. Copy lineups you like or use them as inspiration for your own picks. You can even follow Prize Picks partners like us and tail or fade your picks with just one click. Oh, and let me tell you about Prize Picks early payouts. If your lineup gets off to a hot start, you may now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. So what are you waiting for? Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Coming up, Sean and I get into the news and notes, the big trade that happened just not too long ago. Don't miss it here on The Baseline. All right, Cal Lee Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. Time for us to get into the news and notes happening in the association. If people were paying attention, hopefully you were not sleeping under a rock. The big news that has already transpired, that has kind of, set tremors through the NBA trading space. The Atlanta Hawks move their cornerstone player, Trae Young, to the Washington Wizards for CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert. Big move. We were sitting here last, few episodes, Shaw, talking about what trade or who is going to be probably moved on the trading block, big name person. A lot of us probably thought that it may have been Giannis. Some people, especially, were kind of given, like me, I felt Zion Williamson. We've thrown out Ja Morant, right? We've even said maybe it's time for Draymond Green to get put on the block, right? Like, I think we knew that Trae Young probably would be considered in this. However, we've seen so many episodes of where the Atlanta Hawks, I felt like just, everything has been dictating a direction, and then they decide to go XYZ direction. But they finally go ahead and pull the trigger on this. And I'm really curious from your perspective, how surprised were you that this finally actually happened, or that it had to happen now for them to do this move?
I think a lot of people are surprised with the expediency of the trade. While it's been brewing for a little while, then only one team emerges. So by now, this has been probably even over-reported. So many people have kind of discussed this sideways and backwards. But ultimately, Washington was the only suitor for Trae Young. And I think in the ego play by his press team to some degree was like, hey, he's chosen the Washington Wizards as his destination. And everyone's come out, well, who chooses the Wizards? So I think it's as a result of, in some ways, Trae was viewed as a negative asset despite being a 4-time All-Star, despite leading the Hawks to a conference finals, X amount of years ago. It seems like forever ago now when that actually happened. But this was a mutual parting of ways. And I think there's acceptable risk on both parties' behalf ultimately. But what I will say as an overarching theme is that I think the Wizards and Hawks might have diluted the trade market going into the rest of the season right now. I think like so many inflection points happen. Remember, like Rudy Gobert got moved for 5 draft picks. Everyone's like, oh, well, that's going to be the going market now. And it's like, well, that was Rudy Gobert, right? And then there was the stuff with Kevin Durant. And then each time, like it kind of shifts a little bit. For this to be kind of, I don't know, kind of not say under the radar, but underwhelming by a lot of people's accounts. It was, CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert. Okay, good, solid. But for Trae Young, and no draft pick, no draft equity on either side, I think it's going to set, again, the overall trend for how this trade season may ultimately go, especially since Trae Young wasn't the only, air quote, distressed asset that's available, especially in the point guard realm. So that's what I'm really looking to see as a fallout of this altogether. But I think for the teams involved, it made sense for what they were trying to do. And maybe a little bit even more so from Atlanta's lens. While they didn't get as much of a haul, they get players that fit and can plug and play into their system and get cap flexibility to try to make another move for maybe another front player to play alongside Jalen Johnson.
Yeah, you've unpacked a lot of really key notes. And listen, I mean, you can kind of, we can kind of make the argument, like we can have an episode just in and of itself to talk about the Trae Young thing. I'm going to push back a little bit in saying that, like, yeah, the fact that the Trae Young deal happened a little bit earlier this week may have been talked out. I don't think it was nearly as talked out because I really don't think anybody really tapped underneath some of the other underlying themes that I think may have impacted or kind of drove what was taking place. Or maybe, to some of those sources, they spoke about it, but it kind of got buried underneath, the magnification of what you saw on social media, right? Like Trae Young was sitting on the bench and then he's basically, getting up, realizing that now he's been traded mid-game and things of that nature. I often find like when things happen and how they happen speaks more sometimes than just what's actually on the paper, right? What's interesting to me is that if you knew that there was stuff going around on him actually being moved, why have him out there? And obviously there, to me, it spoke more about the disconnect between, I think, Trae Young and the Atlanta Hawks organization. And I think you kind of sense that even when Quinn Snyder came in as the head coach, right? Because remember, they moved on from Nate McMillan, like, like out of nowhere, right? And given, yes, he struggled, but they realized, they say, look, this may be more about what the organization wants to do 3, 4, 5 years down the road, regardless of whether or not we've got a Trae Young. You know what I'm saying? I think, and this is me, just how I feel. I think you can clearly see the disconnect between Quinn Snyder and Trae Young and the future of what this team needed to be and where he sees that the team to be. And I think when you have young assets like Jalen Johnson, guys like Dyson Daniels, you're basically picking the culture of what Quinn Snyder wants to build with those pieces in place is going to far, outvote what perception Trae Young is, about, where he fits into the scheme. And I think the Atlanta Hawks can no longer afford to keep hanging on to a player who still may have a lot of upside, obviously, but
Sure.
for where the organization needs to be, it cannot be to undermine what Quinn Snyder as a potential coach and what his cachet has been when he used to coach the Utah Jazz. If you're not actually trying to give him the pieces that he thinks is needed for him to build a competitive basketball team. And I think that to me speaks volumes, and how you handle that, especially with the way Trae Young was kind of sat out there and then had to get up mid-game. All of those things, I think, speak to how things are handled, how organization handles things, how you see that type of player and where their future is or isn't with the organization. I just think it's kind of spoke volumes. And I know that there's a lot of other undertones that could probably be spoken to that, but I thought that to me highlighted a lot about the Atlanta Hawks choosing Snyder and the culture of what they think the Atlanta Hawks are going to be, and that Trae Young probably doesn't fit that, and they can redo that with the young assets that they currently have.
Well, they saw, I mean, if Trey doesn't get injured in the way that he does and Atlanta doesn't start to play well for the most part, I mean, they're still under 500 or just under as we're recording, right? But there was a stretch where everyone was like, oh, look how this is coming together. Alexander Walker seemed to fit a little bit better. Luke Kennard with Jalen Johnson being the point forward and distributor. With Trey, while he does average 10 plus assists and is one of the league leaders in those categories year to year, it's a lot of everybody kind of standing around. And the way he gets people involved is very decisive. And in some ways, I've heard Roger Bell say this, like, not everybody likes playing with players like that. It's almost like, the Russell Westbrook syndrome back in the day as well, too. It's just like, all right, well, the assists are there, but how does he really get them? Is he really generating and moving and flowing with the offense, or is he just kind of ball dominant and waiting to kind of do his thing and then dumping off at the last minute, so to speak? Yes, he's good at the lobs, and so he got Clint Capella paid, multiple years as well, too. So I don't want to disrespect, what he does bring to the game. But ultimately, Atlanta's in a different situation now. I think he's alluded to with Quinn Snyder at the helm, but also the personnel that they have on this roster, not best suited for Trae Young's skill set, especially when the defense was so porous when he was out there on a regular basis. So Washington says, hey, we'll take a chance. We are a rebuilding franchise. We have all the guys that they had on the roster. Nobody was marquee, and somebody had asked me this as well. I was like, well, I think this is an acceptable risk, but also the notion of like, well, Trae Young can also maybe sell a couple tickets, right? And so while I love George and Sar and, all the young guys out there, they're Koulibaly, like those guys aren't ticket sellers, to the mainstream public. So while you are probably still not going to be good, you get a higher draft pick, and maybe that person comes in and helps fix that and also send you in the right direction in terms of being more competitive. I think this makes sense from the Washington standpoint without hurting too much in the immediate. But Atlanta's a team that really needs to watch it because they had, they were many people's pick as a sleeper team in the Eastern Conference, and they haven't quite delivered on that. But now they have the ability to maybe do a couple more things with Trae Young out of the picture.
I think so. To your point on that, that's where Quinn Snyder has to come in, right? Now he has to really put his imprint on how he wants to develop those young, talented players along with Alexander, the Kai Walker, get those guys really, together. This is the reason why I had kind of spoken to the fact that the mistake that the Atlanta Hawks made was not keeping DeJounte Murray. And at the time when they were really thinking about whether or not this dynamic was or wasn't going to work out, reading the tea leaves with how Quinn Snyder was utilizing DeJounte Murray and what they were getting out of it, and realizing that it's just not working with Trae Young. One thing I will say, Shaw, that this actually might be perfect timing for the Washington Wizards because they're in a very unusual space, right? The first thing that you think about is if you're a Washington Wizards fan, what's going to attract me to go to a Washington Wizards game? It's clearly not because the team collectively is going out there and competing on a night in, night out basis, and are just falling short of losing. Like, they invent ways to lose. They're just not a well-constructed basketball team. Sometimes what can cure those ills is you have such a dynamic player, right, that goes out there and just does amazing things, has amazing statistics, and they may even look like empty calorie statistics in the beginning, but it elevates a level of watchability. And I think it also elevates a level of excitement, even for some of those marginalized players that want to actually still play on the team to step up and be better. It may actually encourage the organizations to turn around and say, hey, we actually want to get a coach that Trae Young can work with. Look, they tried this with Jordan Poole. He was not ready for that. He was not ready to go and take a team, a franchise, put them on his shoulders and go elevate them with his style of play and how he plays. He was never built for that, unfortunately, right? And he never grew into that. And the Wizards never gave him a chance to do that. You don't have to worry about that with Trae Young because he already did that coming in with the Atlanta Hawks. It's just that the direction and the narrative have changed, and his mentality about how he sees being an important or an integral part to an organization has changed as well, too. So this may actually be a good situation, say, for a guy like Trae Young, because then if he gets it and does it with the Wizards are wholeheartedly going to buy into, what do you need? What do you want? And they'll give into that aspect of it. The only thing is will he elevate and mature as he goes along, as being that guy, wanting to be that guy? Or will he be the kind of person to say, I'm using Washington as a pit stop, you know what I'm saying? Or as kind of like as a bookmark, because somewhere down the road, I'm looking at a bigger market for the type of talents and the way that I play my game that's better suited for what it is I want to do for the remainder of my career.
Yeah, there's a lot there from the Washington lens. I think contrarians would say that him going there, while none of those guys are star level dudes, would he go there and stunt their growth to even whatever that next level of their iteration of their career development is, right? They may not all be stars or even all stars on this roster. I think Sar might be trending in that direction. But does Trae Young come there and then just kind of mute their ability to get to whatever the next best version of themselves is? And that's a real question. And I think how you ended it is very much like, how is the two entities, both Trae Young and the Wizards organization, going to push forward? Can you find a way to thread the needle where, like, hey, I get to still be like a all-star level type player, but I'm really now raising the floor of these other young guys as well too, so that we're all rising and moving in the same direction, as opposed to it being the Trae Young show, which I think it has been in previous stops, or his previous stop in Atlanta, which alienated so many other players. So that's just something to definitely watch. There's people out there saying that he won't play a minute because the Wizards still want to tank. I don't really think that will be the case, but he might do the quiet tanking, like he's playing half games or every other game and that type of thing. I don't think that he will not touch the floor this year, but there's a lot for the Wizards to truly try to understand with Trae Young, and Trae Young to reflect on personally, to see how he wants to be a better and more respected basketball player to ultimately gain his next contract. Because he has, I think it's a $47 million player option next year or something along those lines. He could opt in, or maybe he opts out and tries to take longer years. He may not see another max contract in the immediate future right now, but he's only 27. So there's time for him to kind of turn things around. And he's going to have to try defensively. I think that's something that all coaches and general managers are going to want to see. Like, yeah, we know he's diminutive, but Steph Curry, right? Can he be like that type of guy where you're not just being picked on a regular basis, and you're trying to get up into guys and figure out a way that, listen, just because I'm small, you're not going to bully me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It again, this is a very interesting trade, but again, to what you were just saying too as well, Shaw, I think this also is now setting the tone for what I think we all might be expecting for other, high notable players, NBA players that we know are, have been in the trade discussions. What are the expectations about what pieces are going to be utilized to move those players? And I think that's something that we obviously have to watch as well too. Because to your point, if most of it is just player and money with no draft picks involved, then it's not something's amiss, but something's awry. And clearly organizations are like, let's just do away with that stuff, because obviously you guys have a different perception about what the future is going to look like with what trade with draft pick values are going to be like in the next 3 to 5 years. Let's just look at what is it from a player perspective that helps move this along. Because obviously we've seen plenty of trades kind of die at the midnight hour because there was a draft pick that was being thrown in there that they didn't want thrown in there, or a draft pick being pulled back, or because of a physical being, a physical being failed, or whatever the case may be. I think that they're trying to push through all of those typical obstacles to make sure that the deal gets done. The sooner it's done, the sooner organizations and franchises can move on to whatever next phase of their agenda is supposed to be.
Yes, sir.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we got to talk about a couple of rumors about some other players possibly being moved, another AD injury, and hey, man, somebody's talking about something with the Pelicans being closed for business. What up with that? And then obviously we got our coveted Who You Got. So don't go anywhere. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline Podcast continues.
You've earned this. Now it's time to embark on your own personal adventure. Book your vacation with exquisite travel and tours today. Explore the world and discover yourself.
We're back, Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast. Time to go through some of the news and notes happening in the association. Shaw, the Memphis Grizzlies have now announced that they are entertaining offers for Ja Morant. Oh my goodness. Shocking. It was like entertaining. I thought it was just entertaining that they weren't actually coming out right and saying that they were entertaining these offers. Like, why do you think now suddenly the Memphis Grizzlies have to make a formal announcement about the fact that they were entertaining offers for Ja Morant?
If you read Sean's tweet, it's just like, hey, we are focused on a different direction. We have some promising young guys, etc. But I think the Trae Young trade probably was the inflection point for them. It was like, okay, now we can be all right about this.
Free
and
at last.
See where it is.
Free at last. We're free.
But they did make sure to whoever fed the information to Shams to say, like, we're happy to move forward with Ja Morant as well too. So the old obligatory, hey, we're not going to give them away, but we would entertain opportunities there. So here comes all the trade rumors. Trade machines have been fired up. The thing I think I'm seeing the most is Miami again, Minnesota, which does make some sense, potentially if you feel like you can get those two really excitable personalities in Anthony Edwards and Ja Morant to kind of coexist. Houston being thrown around there as well too. Milwaukee, because of what Giannis said not too long ago, that, hey, I'm committed. The Bucks will have to trade me. I'll never request a trade. So will the Bucks now go again and try to get him another player?
What was your Mamba meme?
Soft. SOFT.
I'm surprised we're not talking about that some. I thought you still had a little left in the tank for that.
Well, Ja Morant is on I wouldn't say the trade block, but he's in the exploratory talks if you want to call and make the Memphis Grizzlies an offer. So I'll kick to you. Not so much from the Grizzlies standpoint. Do you think there's people out there who should be kicking the tires on thinking about what it would mean to bring Ja Morant into their organization?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Why not? You kick the tires around, right? I just hope that as you kick the tires and, obviously when you kick a tire can potentially move. If it doesn't move, then it must mean you don't work out with your legs quite often. You keep skipping leg day, right? But if you're kicking the tires around and something comes up underneath, like dust or whatever, just make sure whatever you're kicking doesn't fly up in front of your face. So part of what I mean by that is just because you're going out there fielding offers for a guy like Ja Morant doesn't mean that your house is completely in order to accommodate or acquiesce to a type of player like Ja Morant. If you have a track record of just not being able to develop and coach up or put a guy like him in a position where you alleviate the pressures of living up to the expectations of being a star player, or you don't position him to isolate him or to encourage him, you know what I'm saying, to keep him out of getting in his own way of seeing the level of greatness that he could potentially provide, then, you know, sure, you can do all of that all day long, but all you're doing is really subjugating to the same nonsense that we've been talking about, you know, since day one. You know, listen, Ja Morant is a potential MVP-like type of player when his mind's right. He's playing in the right circumstance, situation, and culture. The unfortunate part is we obviously do not know what that looks like, right? Because even when the Memphis Grizzlies were successful, they obviously were doing a hell of a lot in order to sweep under the table some of the nonsense that now has just surfaced, you know? And the only other franchises that I could ever think of where you have that kind of craziness going on and it's been tempered down because there's been some level of success. I can't even think from an NBA standpoint. I'm thinking like NFL standpoint with the Pittsburgh Steelers and a coach like Mike Tomlin. And I feel like you're going to need that kind of person to be around Ja Morant, because at the very least, him as a person takes off of whatever the player is doing that it might be undermining the organization, and it more is about the culture. So if the culture is successful, they can give a damn what Ja Morant does. He can kick rocks if he isn't with the program. But if you're going to let Ja Morant be the face of that, obviously it meant you gave up a tall order to get him. And in doing that, you've already put yourself behind the eight ball, because now you're basically saying the future of the organization and the franchise evolves around him. So unless you have an already legendary presence that he's going to humble himself to play next to and play with, it's got to be the culture and the cachet. Like if he goes to Miami, what would stymie the nonsense that Ja Morant exhibits is playing for Spoelstra and playing for Riley. That I can see. That could be viable. I know you weren't on board with it because it's Miami, but I think the culture might stymie that. But you send them off somewhere else where they're gonna, you know, roll the dice. So let's say we were talking about the Wizards. Wizards ain't gonna stop what Ja Morant's been pulling off. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, I think whatever ends up happening is not a situation where he's going to go and be the lead guy, face of the franchise. I think your points there are eloquent and exactly spot on. He's going to, if he's traded, I would imagine the team acquiring team would want to have a built-in not only structure but kind of like 1A superstar that he would then have to then kind of, hey, you know what, this is this guy's team. I'm a complementary, high-level complementary piece to whatever we're ultimately trying to build. So to me, Minnesota does make sense, right? I think you can do that. If you're Milwaukee, sure, right? The Heat, because of the culture, but also while he would be the lead guy in terms of potential, the scoring threat, so to speak, having the ball in his hands all the time, Bam Adebayo is a leader of that team, and they're not trading Bam for Ja Morant. So, like, you know, he would obviously still be in the equation there. Any other team, I think it would be subject to a lot of questions. You know, I don't think Phoenix is going to kick the tires on this. I don't think the Raptors are going to kick the tires on this, you know, and all the other teams then would be less than if you're looking at Brooklyn or somebody like that. The one caveat, though, is if Houston for some reason wanted to get involved here, I don't see that. But I know they have that contract of Van Vliet, which they're not sure if he's going to come back. And you just feel like KD at 37, you don't want to waste championship opportunities. I just don't think Udoka and company would also.
Did you see his reaction the other night? You know, where he took the Gatorade and threw it down, and you know he exhibited a level of disappointment and frustration with the young guys, right? Jabari Smith and Amin Thompson. Sure. You know, and listen, I could very much see a guy like, I'm not saying that Durant is that kind of dude. He's not shiest or sneaky or nothing. But Udoka is sitting there saying, man, like, look, man, we can't have, you know what I'm saying, a 37-year-old, you know, point forward, you know, playing 41-something minutes because everybody else can't step up and do their job. Listen, we've seen Udoka, man. He's shelved guys, you know what I'm saying, when they're not playing to what his expectations are or committed to what he is asking of those guys to do. And if he thinks that he can get that from somewhere else, he might do that just to shake the nonsense up, man. Just to make them realize that, hey, Just because you got a nice extended contract doesn't mean that you know what I'm saying it's all roses on this side of the spear, especially if you're in contention. So, I wouldn't be surprised by that if that were to happen. I think what would shock me though is that type of personality. A person like Ja Morant is going to be okay with that, right? Like, can he humble himself knowing he can't pull that nonsense with an Udoka, can't pull that nonsense with a KD, especially when they're in contention.
Yeah, I mean, and in the Western Conference, unlike the Atlanta and Washington trade where they basically traded into the same division, I can't see Memphis and Houston pulling off something like that too, where you're going to have to see him literally 4 times a year, vying for playoff positioning. Like, I think that'd be a little bit tough for both parties, but particularly for the Memphis Grizzlies to kind of swallow, especially if the return is, Fred VanVleet. Although a pro's pro, I just don't know if it puts them in the next tier that they're looking to go, and the young assets that they would be looking to get from Ja. Houston probably wouldn't be willing to give because Amen's not going in that deal. I doubt Jabari Smith would be because the duplicity with Jaren Jackson Jr. So, I think there's a lot to be discussed, but ultimately keep your eyes out, man. Ja Morant's rumors are going to continue to fly until that February deadline.
Absolutely. All right, let's move things along, Sean. We're talking about our man AD, boy. Whew. Oh man, AD. Another injury. Another injury that is going to have him shelved for quite an extensive period of time. What more can we say about this, right? Like, for Anthony Davis, man, I enjoy him as a player when he's on the basketball court. I just don't enjoy the extension of injuries that he is, he continually keeps enduring and suffering. And I don't know if it's because it's the sport. I don't know if it's just, his regiment. Like, bro, it's one of the great mysteries next to Blake Griffin that just befuddle me. Because that level of greatness that you see exhibited from when Anthony Davis does play and participate for any stretch of time or any stretch of games, you can clearly see it. But it's hard to say, he is going to be a franchise player. It's always hard to, put him in that realm of conversations of where he would be among the greats, because your best ability is availability. And it's just something that's just never been an ally for him through his career.
Yeah, I think as AD, it's really interesting, kind of tongue in cheek. This account on Twitter called, I think it's the player haters or something like that. Excuse me for getting it wrong, but they chronicled his injuries just within the last year of being a Dallas Maverick. And when you become the face of a monumental seismic shifting trade in the NBA for one organization, and this is what you've already been dealing with. Now we're talking about ligament damage. And I saw the play. I was happened to be watching that game specifically. And the guy just kind of like ran into him. And I guess anything can happen at any given time. It didn't look particularly egregious. It didn't look particularly physical. It just, the guy ran by and was cutting on the baseline, and he put his hand out and like it bent it back. And now ligament damage, which could mean he's out for the remainder of the season. I think no one really wants to say that, but that's where it's trending as he's seeking second and third opinions right now for this risk, because they also know, well, if he's out for the remainder of the season, ain't nobody trading for dude. And while he had a semblance of reliability and consistency with the Lakers, the last couple of years have definitely shifted against him. And it is unfortunate because he is a really talented basketball player who provides, can be one of the best two-way players in the game, but just cannot stay on the floor. And here we are yet again here with another AD trade or AD injury that now will impact a potential trade for him to go anywhere in the NBA.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. And I want to preface this part of it before we move on. I really want people for a moment. It's hard to, but I want people for a moment to stop looking at what is reflected on the surface. Because if you really think about it and break it down, again, in those patches of where he was available, when he played for the Pelicans, when he played for the Lakers, and now even with the Dallas Mavericks, his productivity is unquestioned. He literally can be a game changer when he is on the basketball court. And some of these injuries, I think, to your point, Shaw, they feel like they're fluke injuries or whatever. You never want to feel like, this guy's taking L's on purpose, because there's obviously a greater scheme being involved. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of any kind of conspiracy theories. What I'm saying is that at some point we're going to probably wind up having that conversation that if the number of injuries are so insurmountable and so frequent that we have to talk about Anthony Davis possibly packing it in, right? Like basically hanging up the you know what I'm saying, the high tops and not playing ever again, because there's no way that he can maintain a level of consistent health to play the demands of where the current NBA is, which is hard to fathom, because when he's out there, he's a wrecking ball for other opposing offenses. He's a clutch player, you know what I'm saying, offensively for his own team when he plays, right? He is a matchup nightmare. And it's just hard to imagine not seeing that out there, because there's just these incessant injuries, and not just in one specific place. Like 10 years ago, it would have been great talking about it's the same left leg, it's the same ACL, it's the same MCL. He has literally captured injuries from head to toe. Like when we say that, and to your point, not tongue in cheek, he has literally captured injuries from the top of his head all around down to the bottom of his foot. You know what I'm saying? Like I've never seen that before. And, you know, it's just heartbreaking, man, because we're missing some quality years of play from a guy who is an all NBA player, could have potentially been an MVP candidate numerous times over. And had the league had those same rules that we're talking about now to be qualifying for them, he'd have been he would have never been in those conversations. We elevated him because of those conversations, saying if he wasn't injured, he would have been MVP of the league because of the way he was playing in those spurts.
Yeah, and like I'll just close with, you know, no one's rooting against him here, but he's like that old school game operation, you know, just as you said, just here, literally from his face down to his feet. You know, there's been something even, and that's just within the last year, let alone all the things that he's endured throughout. So, yeah. And while I think he was scaring some people off with trade talk, because, well, if you trade for me, I'm going to want a contract extension. Who's extending him? You know, with this extensive injury history, as he obviously, no one's getting younger. So he's consistently having these things. He came into this year's season out of shape and said, hey, he'd work it off or whatever. Like, it's just, nothing is good when it comes to the overall stock value of Anthony Davis, despite the immense talent he's always been able to display when he's been on the floor.
Absolutely. And it's ironic. We're talking about Anthony Davis a hell of a whole lot more than we're talking about Joel Embiid, which says something. Joel Embiid, while he is not having, you know what I'm saying, a resounding year, he's been healthy. He's been on the basketball court. And if you're a Philadelphia 76ers fan, you are so happy about that. Like you feel like there may be a light at the end of the tunnel. Like he may actually make it through the season and be available should the Philadelphia 76ers find a way to play themselves in the playoffs, right? You'll never be able to say that about Anthony Davis now to this point, especially now with a young player like Cooper Flag. Like you're already talking about what's the best way to start rebuilding, right? When we're talking about the Dallas Mavericks, because, all right, with him out the picture, and obviously there is no Kyrie Irving, what are we talking about? Like, where do the Dallas Mavericks go? So you highlighted the part about, you know, hey, Mavericks close for business. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's crazy that we're talking about it, you know, in that regards. All right. So now we're talking about the New Orleans Pelicans. Shaw, Pelicans is like, it's just crazy, right? Like, so we're hearing from Chris Haynes that, the Pelicans are disappointing the market and informing teams that Williamson, Murphy, Jones, Queen, and Fears, you know, will remain in the organization past the February 5th trade deadline. I don't know if I'm buying that. You know what I'm saying? That to me is laughable in of itself. But hey, you know, there's nothing wrong if you truly believe that, you know, things can obviously flourish, especially since they had a couple of stretch of games where they've actually looked decent. But closing the doors before it even opens up, I don't know about that, bro. What's up with that?
Yeah, I mean, whatever. They got a national reporter to be able to put it out there. I think with a team that does not own really their own pick, especially with that Atlanta deal that they've done, that everyone's been kind of backward and forward about that one as well, too, to say that you would not trade any of those guys. And I think when it comes to like even a Trey Murphy or Herb Jones, guys who can get you relatively decent equity, maybe even a pick in this year's draft, it seems a little short-sighted. I wouldn't expect them to trade Derek Queen or Jeremiah Fears. Like those guys just got here. But I think with Zion, we already know the situation there. And then I think with Jones and Murphy, those guys who have interest, especially, you know, teams who need wing help, especially two-way wing help. I'm not buying it like as you. It's out there, so we have to like kind of in essence talk about it. But to me, New Orleans would be very extremely short-sighted to at least not entertain offers on this, because what about this roster, even with Borrego there now, makes you feel like, hey, we're going to be super competitive in the Western Conference. Like, this clearly isn't working, even with Queen and Fear showing a little bit of promise. Jordan Poole, I guess he's been okay. I have nothing against the guy, but just some of these moves just haven't really kind of coalesced. So I don't know if that means Poole is on the traded block, so to speak. But guys who can really get you something in terms of Herb Jones and Trey Murphy or not, that doesn't make any sense.
Jordan Poole, Deadpool. I mean, Liverpool. Lakers in 5. No, I'm just saying. I want to throw something out here, Shaw, real quick. What if the Pelicans find a way to bring Ja Morant onto this roster?
One of those guys would have to be involved. So I don't.
But what if it's that they truly believe that they can still make this work with Zion, and you're trying to bring a combination of Ja Morant and Zion Williamson to the Pelicans?
I would say it's ambitious, Yeah, and I think that's as far as I will allow my brain to go. I think right now, I think it would be ambitious, and on figuring out what because I think Trey Murphy would have to go, without looking at the salary right now. Like I said, you need to make up the salary, number one. So Jordan Poole, Trey Murphy, I think even to make it attractive for them, and then we're just going to punt on whatever draft equity you have like into the future. You don't have your own pick now, so I mean, New Orleans doing something like that.
I would.
Really wild.
I'm saying, Shaw, like, the reason why I bring that up is, why would I not be surprised that we're talking about a franchise where you think that they're going to go direction A, and then they find a way to go direction X, Y, Z, wherever, and do completely opposite of what would actually make sense, right?
Sure.
Like, instead of moving on from Zion, you know what I'm saying, to get Ja, you move Derek Queen, you know what I mean, and you move Murphy. Maybe Fears or wherever, and then you sprinkle in Jordan Poole, whatever the case may be, because they're going to double down on this perception that they're going to have to make it work with Zion. Like, I don't think I would be surprised by the entity, because it would be tantalizing for them to see that. Like, you were talking about how Ja Morant is an exciting player, and maybe it might be about bringing seats, people to the games, watching the games. Yeah, that could be watchable TV, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's winning basketball. Right, especially with the uncertainty of the coaching situation, right? So,
you know what? There's a player here who you've already mentioned, but I forgot about from a salary standpoint. And if you felt like DeJounte Murray was no longer long for this world in New Orleans, you can make the salaries match, because he makes $31 million. John makes, I think, roughly 39. So you got to add another contract in there, like that, a smaller contract, but that is a phase, I guess, maybe. And maybe that's why New Orleans is feeling like, hey, we're not ready to move on from this, because they know they have DeJounte presumably coming back. But if they wanted to make a splash, then to make a contract work, the contracts of Jordan Poole and DeJounte Murray in some combination or some sort of one or the other, so to speak, could be traded for Ja Morant. Mathematically, now theoretically, I don't know about all that, but the math could math.
The math could math. All right, Shaw, we're going to talk about your favorite boy, because it's been a minute, right? And since there's not enough splash going on that side of the pond, and that over that bridge, right, out in Golden State, our young son, Jonathan Kuminga. Again, rumors abroad. Are they finally going to move him? Will he finally get moved? I feel like we have to even just start from the very beginning. You know what I mean? Like who believes that it will happen? Maybe that's the first question that we keep asking ourselves, right? Jonathan Kuminga. What is the likelihood that he actually does get moved by the Golden State Warriors?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you can't believe anything that's coming out of the Warriors camp. So I wouldn't put it past 50-50. They're content to just have him sit. But he is trade eligible as of January 15th. So hence why the conversation is here now. And there are teams, but the price has been driven down yet again as the Warriors continue to shoot themselves in the foot by not playing him, by making whatever comments they make. And he doesn't do himself any favors as well, too. Like I said, I think we've gone back and forth like, hey, who's to blame? I don't want to relitigate any of that. The fact is, he can be traded as of January 15th. Will the Warriors, shit or get off the pot here? that remains to be seen, because they feel like there's a way that they can thread their needle here that I don't know, not many other people see it the same way they do, but Dunleavy and company feel like they have a move here to make with Kuminga that doesn't involve them having to make him a distressed asset. They feel like they can turn him into something positive, which I just don't know. I think it's just time to part ways and not just take whatever you can get, so to speak, but trying to extrapolate like Danny Ainge of this trade. That's not going to happen with Kuminga at this stage.
Yeah, I guess the misnomer for me is, imagine what this is doing to Mike Dunleavy Jr., right? Like, you're a general manager for a storied franchise right now, right? Like, the Golden State Warriors are in that conversation because of the dynasty. You weren't necessarily responsible for anything except for what Myers put together and did for the stretch. Like, you're kind of riding off the coattails of that. So you had that cachet working with you. If you were doing any kind of deals, like the deal that you did put together to bring Jimmy Butler over, okay? But now we're talking about, seminal trades, like trades that are more common sense making, because it's either you're trading for your coach, who obviously has fallen out of favor with this guy, and it's resonated throughout everything that is Golden State. The fans have even chimed in on this, right? The pundits and the analysis have chimed in on this. And at some point, if you're the general manager, I'm not saying you're currying favor to anything. What I'm saying is that it's doing a disservice to the credibility of how you operate and how you want to make moves moving forward by letting a player like him languish. And you're not getting what is necessary for either the team or is necessary for what's reflective of your organization and your league. Because if you miss on this, this is now creating a sieve, right? A rift in the perception of where the Warriors used to be and where the Warriors are now. And you don't want to be the general manager riding on the opposite side of that. If they're not winning, they're not participating in playoffs, they're getting knocked out in the first round, and there could be players out there that you could be making moves for or trading to get to improve this team or improve what the perception is going to look like, giving people a reason to feel optimistic about that as long as you are the general manager. And I think that, to me, is the part that gets missed about this. Like, I get it if it's you're on a wait and see situation, but how much longer do you think you can honestly wait with a player like him? Not because he's a great player, but because it's doing a disservice to how you operate and function as a general manager for a storied franchise like the Golden State Warriors right now.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just a distraction for all parties involved. And as we talk about the Warriors a lot, I mean, you had your great soliloquy on Draymond Green last week and just where they are as a franchise and what they're trying to accomplish. Things like this detract from what they're trying to accomplish. And they are willing and wantful participants in this, I think, at this stage, just because there's a certain level of stubbornness that is happening at various levels, but all the wrong levels, in essence, to kind of like figure out, hey, how to finally part ways from this overall situation. So I bring up Kuminga because, hey, the timeline is now appropriate, where between the 15th and February 5th, he can be moved. But will the Warriors do it and the right suitor come about with a package that they deem at least acceptable? They have delusions of grandeur, I feel like, in trying to get Michael Porter Jr. from Brooklyn for Kuminga. Like, I just don't even see how that's going to happen. Plus, you got to worry about the cap machinations with Golden State, I think, as their first apron team. I think, anyway, I don't want to get into it too much further than the fact that they need to part ways, figuring out ways, in essence, to try to maybe build back some of the cupboard, if you will, while also remaining the next year or two of Curry's ultimate. Is kind of like his swan song, but at a level where he's still playing so competitively, where they can make some noise in the Western Conference. What can you do to complement the Steph Currys and the Jimmy Butlers on your roster?
It'll be interesting. It'll be very interesting. But I think, to your point, Shaw, the first domino, the first piece to that is solving this particular puzzle with Jonathan Kuminga. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, Shaw and I give you who you got. We'll let you know who those two players are. We want you to decide as well, too. Let us know after our conversation who you think is best suited to be the cornerstone of a future franchise for your organization. Coming up here on The Baseline. We are back. Callie, Warren, Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. Time for us to do a little who you got. It's been a while, man. You can get with this or you can get with that. It's been a while since we've done that, man. I'm in my black sheep fields right about now. And you have selected two very qualifying players, Shaw. I must give it to you. Very clever on your part. And the two players that we'll be looking at are really two, up and coming, franchise worthy players who have really taken steps in this last couple of seasons, given their circumstances and situations, albeit not necessarily controversial, but just more opportunistic. So we're talking about Deni Avdija of the Portland Trailblazers.
Deni Avdija.
Avdija. Okay. Thank you for helping me correct them. You know what I'm saying? Get his name right. Should I just call him Deni A? I can call him Deni A, right? And Jalen Johnson of the Atlanta Hawks. So talk to me about our man Deni A. You know what I'm saying? What about him had you attracted for us to select him as a candidate for who you got? And then I think Jalen Johnson is a foregone conclusion. You've mentioned him numerous times. You love you some Jalen Johnson. And I think now, even with this move with Trae Young being sent off to Atlanta, we'll be talking about JJ, Kid Dynamite quite often, even more now with what he's already been able to contribute with the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, ultimately, these two players have ascended in a way that many saw coming, especially themselves. Avdija was really hooping at the latter part of last year and then was garnering interest, I think, for most improved player coming into the season, which to me, I was like, well, I think we know what it is. Like, he started averaging over 25 a game in the latter part of last year, taking over for Portland. So I was like, I think his improvement really came last year, but he's still improving. And he's also elevated into almost like a point forward situation with Jrue Holiday missing the last 27 games for the Blazers, despite playing really good to begin the year. Scoot Henderson hasn't touched the floor. Tiago Splitter said, listen, Deni, you go ahead and run it. And he's been out there doing the damn thing, averaging 26 points a game, 7 assists, and 7 rebounds, shooting 47% from the floor. This guy is looking like he could be a first-time All-Star this year. And on the flip side, Jalen Johnson, as we've talked about many, many, many times, especially in lieu of Trae Young going down and being injured, been thrust into a much more point-forward creative role for the Atlanta Hawks, averaging a career-high 8.3 assists, in addition to the 10 rebounds and 23.5 a game. If you're watching us on YouTube, you see the numbers kind of side by side here. But these two guys are monster point forwards. Both are not afraid to kind of get into you physically, and both of them are decent defensively. I wouldn't say locked down, but they're not going ahead and just letting people kind of just run past them on the other side of the basketball as well, too. But very, very, very similar styles of play to some degree, although they do it in very, very different forms of fashion when it comes to how they're getting to the rim. Avdija, a better perimeter shooter, but both guys take it to the cup and finish strong. My thoughts on both of these guys, I like them both. I'd be curious to see your thoughts on it, Cal. Jalen Johnson, Deni Avdija, which guys are you, or which one of these two are you more intrigued by?
I'm more intrigued by Deni A. And the reason why I say that, Shaw, is to what you just highlighted a moment ago, with the fact that he's been asked to do more because of what he doesn't have access to, right? The fact that we talk about, his ability to dribble, drive, penetrate, to, play kind of in a point forward style because of the rash of injuries to the Portland Trailblazers backcourt has lent itself to this team kind of shifting and morphing into something a little bit different. And for him to be able to still do that and averaging close to 26 points per game, I think is absolutely phenomenal. I think if you had asked me a year or two ago, part of my concern, if you would have said, let's do a who you got in 2024, right, instead of us in 2026, and you asked me to say, would I take Deni A on this? I'm like, I can't, because it still seems like Deni A is the kind of player that needs a point guard or needs someone to help put him in the best position possible to help accentuate his skill set. But what we're seeing right now is like, he's like, I got this. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if he had it deep in the bag, maybe it was suppressed or whatever the case may be, but he is showing you the full range of what he is capable of giving you. And on top of that, he is a pretty solid shooter, right? Like right now he's somewhere around with 36% shooting the three or whatever, which to me, I think that is a little obscure, because I think in a different situation, like let's say if he's playing with the Boston Celtics, he'd been asked to shoot the three even more. And I think he probably will make more threes, even though his percentage may be somewhere in the high 30%, like somewhere close to 40. I think he would have more opportunities to do that. But to me, his all-around game is just awesome. What I love about Jalen Johnson, though, Shaw, is, man, that guy's athleticism is just off the charts. It is untapped athleticism. And I think that he even still has opportunity to grow into his body where he can actually be a type of player. He plays bully ball if he chooses to. Right now, he's playing in an offense that is a little bit more finesse oriented. And we've seen that with Quinn Snyder teams. They don't play with the tough, like with the level of physicality that I think is going to be necessary for his range and what he provides you with. But what can always offset that is your athleticism can usually help you in circumstances and games where if you don't have a consistent jumper, you can find yourself to the rack. You can get to the rim. Jalen Johnson can do all of that. He rebounds the basketball really, really well. They haven't seen that since the heydays of Clint Capella, right? And I think that has helped the Atlanta Hawks still be in range, right, of wherever it is that they are in the Eastern Conference. And again, I don't even think he knows his body well enough to know what he could potentially do. It's kind of like Jalen Duren, you know what I mean, for the Detroit Pistons. I think about how that guy is like a man-child, but once he is in his own zone with his body, he'll be bullying cats like you see Jalen Duren doing right now. I think you could potentially see that with Jalen Johnson.
Yeah, I think both guys are, like as I said, physical in their own ways. Jalen does tend to be slightly more athletic, and just I think he has more of the physical physique, as you will, too, especially when you compare him to a guy like Duren, who truly is a man-child. But again, both do not lack confidence. Both do not lack a physicality that is necessary, for today's NBA. And even in the highlight package that we're showing, if you're watching us on YouTube, it's a lot of threes, dunks, and layups. Is not a lot of mid-range shots for either one of them. Like we are doing what is the most efficient thing, for us. Jalen, I think with his overall physicality, you think maybe he could skew to be more of a post-up guy in certain situations, but that's not something that Atlanta needs him to do because he's facilitating so much offense on a regular basis, as currently constructed. But I am a fan of both of these dudes. It's hard to sit here and say that you could go wrong, I think, with either. I think the Jalen Johnson has probably had a little bit more notoriety in a shorter period of time, while Avdija was kind of on those Washington Wizards team and just kind of like he was doing okay. And then he started to play a little bit better. And then Portland made a swing for him. And it was like, oh, well, they just thought it was kind of like a whatever trade. Like it didn't really make sense, especially in the first half of last year where he was same thing. He was just kind of playing how he was playing in Washington. And something clicked. Something clicked. And this dude was like, nah, I am dope, and y'all are going to feel me out here. And he started really hooping in another level. So I think with his offensive acumen at almost over 26 a game, giving you 7 and 7 there, 36% from the 3-point line as well too. This is a really, really close contest for me, but I think I'm going to go with the overall 3-point and overall, not say 3-point, but the overall offensive efficiency of Avdija. Why I think Jalen Johnson, because he's a little stronger and can rebound more. But I think the play creation is very, very similar, but Jalen Johnson gets a little bit more credit for what he's able to do because the system is really requiring him to do that. But Avdija is showing that here now, especially with, again, Drew Holiday and Scoot Henderson not playing. But I'd go with Deni here, slightly over Jalen Johnson. But I know the masses would probably say Jalen Johnson probably in a runaway. But what about you, my guy? Who you got?
Yeah, listen, I'm not going to leave you on an island. I'm going to roll with you on this because you're asking me who am I taking to be the cornerstone of a franchise. And I don't think that what Deni is doing right now is something that's just a flash in the pan. This is not a 1 year and over thing. This has been a gradual ascension of his overall playmaking abilities. And I'm not even saying play creating. I'm saying playmaking abilities. And I think that to me is going to be the other outline question. Who also can accentuate the opposite of? If you're a playmaker, can you play create? And if you can play create, can you play make? I think with Jalen Johnson, he's shown you that he has play creating abilities, but I'm still waiting to see where the playmaking ability comes. It may never have to come because of the way that the Atlanta Hawks are structured. So his ascension can be one of those great, front court players, that's going to, post up crazy numbers. But I do love the fact that right now his career highs, like, with assists, You know what I'm saying? And a lot of that comes from the fact that you don't have an actual guard, you know, that's been touted to handle the rock and hold the rock. So they obviously feel comfortable putting the ball in his hands and allowing him to help dictate as well as go out and be aggressive and score the basketball. But I think in the overall encapsulation of the conversation, I would look to take Deni A as my cornerstone player, because I'll be the first person to tell you, I was not seeing that in the early out stages of his career. You may have seen glimpses of it. You may people here talk about it, but to see it actually gradually, you know what I'm saying, elevate and then become, you know, the breadth of the conversation with his ability to play and how he's impacting the team. The wins and losses, I think, are kind of smoking mirrors, but the impacts of how he is playing that game, how he is moving that basketball, how he is getting to the basket, how he's scoring, all of that is very Luka Doncic like, right? All of that is very Jamal Murray like, Jokic like, you know what I'm saying? Like guys, SGA like, and we can't use, you know, we can't snuff that. I've been more of the person to be consistent about that conversation. Like when we've done these who you gots, you know, you said the same thing when we had SGA a few years back. I'm like, yeah, he's not going to put, you know what I'm saying? He's not going to wow you, but with what he's doing, it's MVP worthy, like kind of basketball. It's just a question of, will everyone else buy into it? Well, everyone's buying into it now. I think you'll do the same thing for a guy like Deni A.
Yeah. I mean, and it's almost criminal to have a conversation because you really, I just don't
can't lose it either.
Yeah. You really can't. Both guys are 6'8", 24 for Jalen Johnson. Deni's 25. I mean, so like, it's just, you know, what are you really losing? I think if you were trying to build around either one of those guys. But I love this comparison, and I love when we came up with the concept of who you got in general. This is one of the harder ones. I think even one of the more fairer ones we've had maybe in a little while as well too. So let us know, man, who you got, Deni Avdija or Jalen Johnson? Who would you rather build your franchise around? If you're playing NBA 2K, you know, which one would get your juices going on that one, man? So let us know, man, because I think this was a really fun conversation.
I know I cheat code this and stat them up the same.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder on 2K like who has more badges, right? And then who's gained more badges through the course of the season as well. To see, like, you know, these are true, really amazing players who I think both guys are going to be first-time All-Stars this year as well too.
Absolutely, man. This has been a great episode as per usual, Shaw. Good stuff all around. I know that we have got the upcoming MLK Day games coming on, and I know eventually we will highlight and talk about that. You know, fresh off of our dissension, or ascension, down to Orlando for our, you know, annual pod festing, you know what I'm saying, Podfest infestation, you know what I'm saying, where the baseline is going to be front and center doing things down there and stuff like that. But it'll be a great conversation to be had, a lot of good basketball talk to be discussed, and hopefully, you know, our boys Jalen Johnson and Deni A are going to be out there hooping it up and balling it up as well too, giving us a little bit more reason to talk about them through the course of the year, man.
Yeah, they absolutely will. Again, let's hope everybody stays healthy. The Hawks are betting a lot on Jalen Johnson, obviously after the Trae Young trade as well too. So, you know, he's a much of why Trey is out as anything else, because they just see how much potential he has and what he's been able to do to command that team, you know, in Trey's absence for a good majority part of this year. And the Blazers realize, hey, you know what, we have somebody to really build around here right now. So it takes so much pressure off the maturation process of Scoot Henderson and guys like that as well too on this team. And if they go out here and trade Jeremy Grant or anybody else, like, they can really start to build something there with the Blazers. And both teams are play-in bound right now, like a game or two right at 500. And I think we're going to see them kind of hover around those areas. But these two guys are immense. But great conversation, baseline as always. It's alluded to. Can't wait to see you in person, my brother, at Podfest in Jamlando. And we'll keep the things rocking and rolling as always here for the rest of the regular season. Absolutely. So for all of our fans and listeners and future listeners, we appreciate each and every single one of you guys. For the baseline, Cali, Warren, Shaw, appreciate you guys. You know we do. And we will catch up with you next time.